This is Jason Harpe with the Lincoln County Historical Association, here today with Rick Ramseur at Woodside Plantation in Lincolnton, documenting saw playing for the With These Two Hands project. And at this point, we'll start the interview. Rick, pleased that you allow us to come today. If you will, tell us your name and who taught you how to play the saw, and how long ago that took place.
Okay, well, good. Well, thanks for being here. Yeah, I'm Rick Ramseur, and I learned to play the musical saw, as it's called, from my dad. His name was Jack Ramseur. And the story that we always heard growing up is that when he was 13, a traveling Chautauqua show came to Lincolnton, and as it did many of the small communities throughout the whole United States. And he was 13, so he was born in 1910. Trying to see what year that would have been. So yeah, that would have been about 1923 when he heard that traveling show. And he was just enthralled that someone could produce music from a hand tool. And so he said he ran home, didn't walk home, he ran home and went immediately to the basement to my grandfather's toolbox, and got out an old distance saw. And then he remembered where there was a violin bow that belonged to my great-grandfather, who took it on the gold rush in 1849, but the bow was still workable. And from that day, he played from then till the day he died. In fact, he was playing the saw when he had a massive heart attack and died. So he really played till the very end, literally. Just found, he was self-taught. I'm sure he just kept fooling with it until he could get a sound out of it. And it really isn't that difficult to play. I mean, it's one of those things like riding a bicycle. You just have to fool with it. Once you get it, you sort of got it. You just have to get the right bend in the metal. A flexible saw works best. They make a musical saw, and all it is, it's a regular saw, but it's 2 inches longer than a normal hand saw, which gives you an additional octave. And it usually doesn't have any set in the teeth, so you don't damage your pants. You don't want to ruin a new pair of pants with playing the saw. And usually they'll have a little bit better metal, meaning more chrome in the steel, so it doesn't rust quite as fast as a normal hand saw would. So that's a musical saw is a regular saw with just those little additions made to it.
Did your father have any musical training before he learned to?
He did. He took piano as a child, so he was always interested in music. And he used to say he went to Davidson College, and he wanted to get in the Glee Club. Back then, it was a really cool thing to be in a Glee Club, and I guess that's sort of happening now for the first time with the TV show Glee and all. But that wasn't always the case, as we know, to be in a Glee Club. At that time, it was very prestigious to be in the Davidson Glee Club, and he auditioned and didn't make the cut until they found out he could play the saw, and they said, well, that would be a nice novelty act. So he was accepted into the Davidson Glee Club after they found out he could play the saw, and he would do like 2 numbers in their concerts. But anyway, he had a lot of fun with it over the years, but he didn't play it every day. It was usually he'd be asked to play for a church function, in a church basement somewhere, for a family night supper or a Christmas party, company Christmas party, and things like that. But it wasn't something we heard daily, just sort of special events when he would get out the saw. Yeah, saw playing, from what I understand, it was quite popular back turn of the century. Most old people I meet are familiar with saw playing. They have saw it when they were young, whereas young people, a lot of times you see their eyes, whoa, what is going on here? So it was fairly well. Now, I've even found out that in Japan for a while it was popular over there, and they would play with symphonies. It was considered a regular instrument in Japan at some point in time. I don't know when, if that was the 40s or 50s or whatever, but it was popular over there. In this country now, saw playing's more well known on the West Coast. Believe it or not, there's several musical saw clubs, and of course they have a journal, their own newsletter, and all that. And so it is, more popular on the West Coast than it is on the East Coast at folk festivals and whatnot. And there's a thriving. They have an annual convention and all. I've never attended, but I have met people who have attended that.
Did your father talk to you much about his experience at that Chautauqua tent meeting?
Not a whole lot. What I know about that, it was they had a lot of variety. I believe they had poetry reading, and they talked about the classics, and there was music, but it was more probably classical music that was played. That's all I know about that traveling show. I think I mentioned to you when I was a teenager, we would spend some summers up at the Chautauqua Institute outside of Jamestown, New York, on Lake Chautauqua up in western New York. And it was all devoted to higher learning and the classics and that type of thing.
Did your father, at that time when you would be in Chautauqua, did your father participate at all?
No, oh no, he he didn't make that cut. No, they have the Chautauqua Orchestra is supposed to be the best in the world because they have the first chair of all the great symphonies, certainly in the United States. That's where they like to spend their summers, where they can play and perform with the best of the best. So that's it's quite an orchestra that they put together.
And did your father ever mention what his mother and father and your grandparents thought of his saw playing?
I guess they tolerated it. Don't know of any special feedback he got in regards to that. I suppose he would get it out and perform for family on occasions, but yeah, he never really talked about that much.
Now, was his mother and father, your grandparents, were they musically inclined?
No, they really weren't. I never heard either one of them sing or anything, but his, like I say, his grandfather apparently was a fiddle player because he took his fiddle to the gold rush, and that's the only thing he came home with when he came home to fight in the Civil War. And we still have that fiddle now. That's about all he left us.
Now, what caused you to take up the saw?
Oh, just a novelty, just something to do different at parties to get attention, to pick up chicks, I guess. But no, I don't know. It is sort of, a novelty. And then I now play in a bluegrass band, and they let me play a couple of songs. And I'm always amazed how many people have never heard it played before.
When you decided, I guess you just asked your father to teach you, or just because of your background in music?
Yes, he just showed us the basics, which is you put the saw between your legs and you make a kind of a lazy-ass bend in it, and then you get strike the not the side of the saw that does not have the teeth. You get a frequency going, get a sound, and then once you get that sound going, then you move it up or down, which causes a bend in the saw, which produces a different frequency. Hence, you get different notes to hit on it, and it'll produce a sound. So that's a lot of saw players, particularly house carpenters and all, would do this for their amusement. When they were taking a break, they would tap on the saw and maybe produce a simple little tune. But the bow gives it a much fuller sound by just rubbing the bow on the edge. Kind of a haunting sound, almost a ghost-like. And you get the vibrato just by shaking your knee. So as I rub strike the bow on the edge of the saw, I'm shaking my knee, and that's how you get that vibrato sound. That makes it sound a lot richer. I like to say that it's the only instrument I know of that the more nervous you are, the better you sound. So you can't say that for many things. Anyway, my dad played a little bit different from most saw players. He found that rather than striking the bow on every note, he liked just to get a frequency going, and so his bow would just be making that a constant movement, and then as he went up and down, it's hard to describe. Rather than going like do, he would just go get it going. You see the difference?
Yeah.
It's more smooth, and it's just more melodic that way, rather than striking each note, with a bow, as you probably would with a violin and all. So that's a little thing he is different from a lot of other saw players I've seen. And I think it's better that way. That's the way I try to play. Just, in other words, my arm's just like a machine getting that frequency going. It has nothing to do with the rhythm of the song or anything else. I'm just getting a sound with my right arm as I do the notes with my left going up and down.
Will you play us a tune now and
Sure.
tell us what it is you're playing?
As I was saying, the saw, it sounds so much better with accompaniment, either a guitar or usually a piano. And that's how my mom and dad always did. She always played the piano as he played the saw. So I have my wife here at the piano. I don't know if I think it'll pick her up. She's several 10 feet away, but give it a try. Hit a chord there. Let's see. Okay, I believe we're picking her up. Or we'll try a little Edelweiss. That's a song that he used to play because it's fairly easy. It's got a nice range. It's not too high, too low. And so let's give this a try then.